Okay, the reading for this week is Ishikawa Jun's Marusu no Uta, Mars' Song, translated by me, published in 1938. And Ishikawa Jun was arrested and summoned to court and fined a substantial fee for writing and for publishing this work. He was eventually released. He was immediately released, so he was spared the ordeal of having to serve a prison term. But this work caused quite a stir in its day. Okay, so there's a lot to run through on this study guide, so let's first start with the relevant terms. I'm not going to read them all, so you can read them on your own, but metafiction. I have a definition of metafiction. Fiction that self-consciously addresses the devices of fiction, exposing the fictional illusion. Fiction about fiction. Alright, so there's some, I don't know if this work qualifies as an instance of metafiction, because metafiction is generally a phenomenon that appears after the war. But there are some very self-conscious aspects of the work, and aspects that share much with later metafiction. So you can consider that question as you read the work. Number two, so the work employs a self-conscious narrator. In other words, a narrator who draws the reader's attention to the process and mechanics of narration. I have a short note about that. The death drive. Okay, the death drive is Freud's famous term that he develops in his book Beyond the Pleasure Principle, published in 1920. And we see the death drive in action here, I think. You see it in Japan of the mid-1930s and late 30s, this sort of mad, crazy, frenzy drive toward war and imperial expansion and whatnot. I'm not going to read the whole long explanation of the death drive. You can read that on your own. I have an explanation of fascism here. Japan, as I mentioned in another video, there's a debate about whether Japan of the late 1930s and the interwar, or rather war period, qualifies as an instance of fascism, but there's certainly fascistic elements in Japan's society at the time, and Ishikawa Jun writes about those in this work. Okay. Now on to the next part of the study guide, Particularities of Culture. First we have Hachiman, and there's at least one allusion to Hachiman in this story, so I'm going to read its definition. Hachiman is one of the most popular Shinto deities of Japan. Hachiman is the patron deity of the Minamoto clan and of warriors in general. You remember that the Minamoto clan from the late Heian period is the one that was victorious over the Taira clan, and it was a group of warriors, right? And Hachiman is often referred to as the god of war. Hachiman is commonly regarded as deification of Ojin. You don't need to, yes. Hachiman is seldom worshipped alone. Hachiman shrines, which you'll find all over Tokyo, for example. There's several famous ones in the Tokyo area. Hachiman shrines are more frequently dedicated to three deities. Alright, that's not so important. Okay, next is Roe no Uta, the field encampment song. Alright, it's a Japanese gunka, or military song, that actually existed and was very popular in Japan from 1937. Marusu no Uta of this work seems to be based on this actual song. So if you want to hear the actual song, look up Roe no Uta on YouTube, and there you can listen to a version of it. Several other particularities of culture that I have listed up, kamata. You can fill these as you read the story. Okay. Next, as you read the story, you should have a general understanding of the historical background of Japan in the 1930s. The story, as I mentioned, was published in 1938, early 38, I think. And so you should know what's been happening in Japan in the last few years. 1935, you have the rapid rise of the militarists, of the sort of imperial expansionist clique of the military. Takes more and more power. In 1936, you have the famous incident, the Nini-Doku Jiken, or February 26th incident, which was a major coup attempt against the Japanese government by the Imperial Wei faction, the Kodo-ha in which groups of assassins killed or attempted to kill the upper leadership of the government and seized control of the buildings. 1,400 junior military officers took up arms in Tokyo, occupying the Diet, the army ministry, and police headquarters. 3 cabinet members were killed. The rebellion was eventually put down under orders from the emperor. Okay, that was in 1936. 37, you have the famous Marco Polo Bridge incident, which was a conflict between the Chinese and Japanese troops near the Marco Polo Bridge outside Beijing, which developed into warfare, full-scale warfare between the two countries. So when you read Western accounts of the Second Sino-Japanese War, they usually date it to this incident, 1937. So the war is 1937 and 1945. If you ask the Chinese, they date it to the Manchurian, the sort of expansion of Japanese forces in Manchuria in 1931. So they call it the 15-year war. Alright, several other incidents. I'm not going to go through all of these. The Nanking Massacre of 1937. So this story is written in the immediate wake of the Nanking Massacre of 37, right? So Ishikawa Jun would have been reading these headlines every morning in the paper, right, about the Nanking Massacre, about the expansion of the war in deeper and deeper into China, and so forth. Okay, and then I have a note on the publication. The work appeared in Bungakukai, which was one of the major literary magazines at the time, but was immediately banned within a week of the magazine's distribution. Unsold copies were seized. The magazine was ordered to cease publication temporarily. Ishikawa and his editor, his famous editor Kawakami Tetsutaro, were hauled into the Tokyo District Court, and they were fined 30 and 50 yen respectively. Kikuchi-kan, who was then the doyen of Japanese letters and editor-in-chief of the prestigious literary journal Bungei Shunju, intervened and agreed to pay their fines, and the 2 men were released. Okay. Alright, enough with the short notes and background information. Now let us jump into the text, and we will consider these 9 questions as we read the story. So you are responsible for answering these 9 questions in your assignment. Question number 1. Describe the narrator. What is the narrator's relation to the world he inhabits? What does he find lacking in the world at present? Okay, just a general question about the narrator and his sort of personality and character. And what does he find, you could also add there, what does he find lacking in himself too? We should remember that this work is not just a critique of everything around him, of Japan's descent into fascism and all the idiots who surround him and so forth. It's also a self-critique, a critique of his own inability and impotence during this time. Okay, number 2. Describe the narrative structure of the work. What metafictional elements are employed? Is the narrator a self-conscious narrator? Explain. Okay, so I have the note at the top of the study guides for metafiction. We'll want to review that as you answer this question. Number 3. Reality and fiction are initially presented by the narrator as irreconcilable opposites. Yet it soon becomes apparent that they are somehow linked. Okay? Discuss the relationship between reality and fiction, art and life, that is evoked or suggested in the work. Okay? So I should mention that a lot of Ishikawa Jun's works of this time in the 1930s have the same kind of narrative structure. A writer who is trying to create this world of pure fiction and sort of escape into the world of art is unable to do so because reality, the actual political circumstances or social circumstances of the time, invariably impinge on him and invade and interrupt his project. And we see that structure here. Okay, so consider that as you read it. Here he's trying to write a novel in the manner of André Gide, who is his sort of literary hero at the time, but he's interrupted constantly. And he's unable to do so, and he's forced to write about the immediate circumstances of the world around him, even though he'd rather not do so. Okay. Number 4. Discuss the character Obiko. What female type, sort of archetype, or combination of archetypes does she represent? Okay. And we see this sort of obiko type in several of Ishikawa Jun's works of the period. Number 5, discuss the character Fuyuko. Her name is significant too. Why is the character Fuyu, winter, in her name? Discuss her tastes, her inclinations, her personality, etc. What are the circumstances surrounding her suicide? Okay, so she's the character who half accidentally, half intentionally commits suicide in the work. Can her life and death, and particularly her hobby of feigning various handicaps, this sort of dramatic hobby that she has, be read as an allegory for something, as symbolic for something? Also discuss the scene at her funeral wake. Okay. Number 6, discuss the character Sanji, who is Fuyuko's husband. Okay. What sort of type is he? What does he represent? How does he respond to the situation, on the political and military and social situation unfolding around him? Number 7, describe the mood of the times. What images or symbols or elements of militarism, fascism can you identify in the work? Okay. So how is this mood conveyed in the work by the narrator? Number 8 is discuss the motif of refusal or resistance that runs through the work. Okay. Explain the context, target, significance, and impact of each act of refusal or resistance. So the narrator makes several sort of gestures of resistance or refusal in the work, explain their efficacy, explain their circumstances in each instance. Okay? And finally, describe the scene at the aquarium. Okay? So there's a scene where the narrator goes to the aquarium and he observes the fish inside, and he observes the people watching the fish and so forth. Are the various species of fish metaphors for something? How does he describe the spectators? Are they metaphors for something? Okay? And that concludes our study guide for this short work by Ishikawa Jun, Marusu's song, Marusu no Uta, published in 1938, translated by me. Also, I just remembered something. Obiko, the character Obiko, and Sanji, they leave together, right? Just before he has to embark for his military service. They leave together and sort of flee reality in this short weekend trip. And the question that you should also ask yourself as you read this, is there anything inappropriate about their relationship? In other words, are they having an affair? If so, what is the evidence to support this? So throw that last question into the list of questions as you answer. Okay, that's all. Bye-bye.